A great many partners are emerging between Russia and China. They appear naturally. We have over $200 billion in turnover with China, already $230 billion according to various estimates. And the volume is increasing. Therefore, the importance of the Chinese language will certainly increase. This, as they say today, is a medical fact. There's no getting away from it. The younger members of my family already speak Chinese fluently. Smaller members are not usually shown by Putin, but we know about them. They exist, from his words at least. It looked like bragging to me now, saying, "Trump, you want to put sanctions on China?" Look, we have a 200 billion turnover, and it is growing. We will continue to work in this direction. You know, when we started talking to you, I said one thing about Trump's false idea that trade is the best way to stop wars. But he has a lot of false ideas, and one of them is that he planned and plans to tear China away from Russia or Russia from China. It's actually quite difficult to do because Russia, and Putin just confirmed this, Russia is already largely 3 to 4, maybe 4 or 5 digested by China. And in fact is no longer quite even a food but something digested. I mean, in fact, Putin just confirmed this, that in fact his grandchildren or whatever speak Chinese. What does that mean? It means they're not really Russian anymore, I guess. That is, in fact, a completely false idea. Tearing China away from Russia or Russia from China is an impossible task. And the fact that Trump is still setting such a goal for himself is evidence that he will once again accomplish nothing. So he's going to waste his energy, just as he has been trying to negotiate with Putin for 6 months, in fact, and spoke to him 6 times on the phone. After each conversation, Putin intensified bombing strikes on Ukraine. Now, after this terrible blowback that you witnessed for yourself, what did Trump do? He sent Witkoff to Moscow, the very man who is the famous solver. So, what can Witkoff do? He can talk to Putin about further business plans, about developing the subsoil of the Arctic, about developing rare earth metals in Russia. Witkoff's favorite topics, he's a solver, he's actually a developer. That is a person who is used to developments to solve the problems of construction, the sale of apartments, that is, the sale of real estate. So it's his business, and this is the man who went to talk to Putin. Can he stop? Realistically, is sending Witkoff to Moscow an appropriate response to these terrible strikes that have killed so many civilians in Ukraine? Is that an adequate measure? Another inadequate measure. Once again, I emphasize, he gives weapons, thank God, thank you. But you can't expect more than that. Yes, because Witkoff has stated that ending the war in Ukraine should be a key goal before President Trump's term ends before 2029. Donald Trump is giving 8-12 days to make a peace deal. Somehow that's a very different timeline, 8-12 days and the end of Trump's term in 2029. Then there's Witkoff, who's flying to Putin for something to talk to him again. I'll remind you that there was talk of buying the Commander Islands before this, too. Donald Trump has voiced this idea that they want to, or they're okay with buying these islands. Russia even had some very interesting sum announced. Maybe that's why Witkoff is going to Russia. Trump wanted to annex Greenland, Canada, and the Panama Canal to the United States of America, and then he decided to build skyscrapers in the Gaza Strip and make a Riviera there. That is, in fact, now the Commander Islands. In fact, Russia has a lot of things to trade. The main thing is that Trump doesn't help Ukraine very much. That is, in fact, really absolute inadequacy. A person just doesn't understand what's going on in the world. Has a hard time imagining where anything is, who controls what, and so on. I mean, it's actually a big disaster, of course. I emphasize again what to do. 77 million Americans have made that decision. And there is nothing we can do about it. We have to take it as a given. And squeeze what you can squeeze out of this strange man who is now, by misunderstanding, the President of the United States. So far, we have managed to squeeze out weapons and some sanctions, which also, in general, weaken Russia's economy a bit, and that's good. By the way, we can also hear and see what they say and think about this trade on Russian TVs. Attention should be drawn to Zelensky's decision to increase the size of the Ukrainian security service by 10,000 people. This is a very serious signal that Ukraine is planning large-scale sabotage and terrorist operations against the Russian Federation on a long-term basis, both during the current conflict and after its conclusion. And given the SBU's desire to copy the handwriting and operational priorities of Israel's Mossad, we can expect that the main goal, which is formulated by Zelensky to terrorist and extremist Malyuk, who heads the SBU, is to create a long-term echelon subversive terrorist network with illegal residents on the territory of the Russian Federation, and they will be focused on long terms of action from several years to 10 to 15.
На территории Российской Федерации. Причем ориентированы они будут на длительные сроки действия от нескольких лет до 10-15.
And this threat, which Ukraine is projecting for Russia today, forces us to reconsider in a very serious way all systems related to ensuring national security.
Заставляет нас очень серьезным образом пересматривать все системы, связанные с обеспечением национальной безопасности.
On the one hand, they drew attention to the fact that they are increasing the number of SBU members, and this, they said, threatens Russia with some large-scale actions on the territory of Russia itself. Although, just let the SBU members go home, they will organize a better showdown inside than any Mossad and Ukrainian security service. There also sounded the idea that the U.S. offered to buy the Commander Islands from Russia. The head of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, said that if you want to trade, he suggested that the U.S. return Alaska, because Russia does not trade land, but only returns its own, of course. We don't trade in land, as those retired lieutenant colonels suggest, unlike the others. Therefore, neither for $15 billion nor for any other money will we sell anything to anyone, and we are used to returning our own and will always do so. So, basically, $7.2 million for what Alaska was sold for is not so much money that we can't find it and offer it to our American partners to consider giving Alaska back. So they don't, or they did? I can't figure it out. It's hard to expect consistency from General Kartapolov. The man is talking nonsense. That is, once something was somewhere, we'll return, go back, go conquer Alaska if you have the will, if you have the strength. As for what Mr. Korotchenko said in the previous piece, he makes a good point. Yes, indeed, there is a serious, big, bloody, monstrous war going on. And the fact that Russia carries out acts of terrorism all the time, one of which you observed, experienced in your own apartment. This means that Ukraine should not look at it calmly. Ukraine must respond. And Operation Spiderweb was one of the answers, and the other answer was an operation of civil resistance, a guerrilla war, when Ukrainian hackers on the one hand and Belarusian cyber guerrillas paralyzed the activities of Aeroflot.
Украинские хакеры, с одной стороны, и белорусские киберпартизаны парализовали деятельность Аэрофлота.
Critical infrastructure in Russia was paralyzed.
В России была парализована.
And it's guerrilla warfare. It's just the difference between guerrilla warfare during World War II, when they were running trains down, and the guerrilla warfare that's going on now. It's like that. Cyber guerrillas.
Сейчас ведется. Она вот такая, вот киберпартизаны.
So there will be many more surprises for the Russian occupiers on their own territories. There's a war going on. By the way, I want to say that Korotchenko is a little behind the times. He says Ukrainian special forces are copying Israeli ones. It's no longer clear who's ahead. This spiderweb operation, it's actually perhaps a little bit ahead of what Israel is doing. I'm not going to measure, but in any case, Ukraine is already ahead in some respects, so it's unclear who's going to learn from whom. So Ukraine has something to surprise Korotchenko, Kartapolov, and most importantly, Putin, so they still have everything ahead of them. Yes, I won't show you what the lands returned by Russia look like. Everyone has seen the pictures of Chasov Yar, which Russia destroyed and spared from life. And then a few months later, they talk about how Ukraine has left them uninhabitable cities. Although, if we recall the Donetsk and Luhansk territories occupied in 2014, which are now without water, we would like to ask again who exactly makes these territories uninhabitable. Not that I doubt this answer, but I'd like to pose the question nonetheless. Igor, I'd also like to hear from a woman we don't respect who also, somehow I think they've been doing everything this week to completely confuse things, because one talks about how they don't sell or trade territories, and then they talk about Alaska, which they sold very cheaply.
Потому что один говорит о том, что они не продают и не торгуют территориями, а потом говорит про Аляску, которую они продали очень дешево.
The other says that Russian is being oppressed here, and no one is allowed to speak it, not only on the airwaves, but even at home, sitting in the kitchen. Then goes on the air and says roughly the following. Let's make a record of it. According to their own statistics, 70% of Ukrainian soldiers speak Russian in the trenches. The Ukrainian delegation at the talks with Russia also spoke Russian, which was confirmed by the head of the delegation, Ukrainian Umarov, who is not native Ukrainian. It turns out that there is no infringement of the Russian language to go straight to the whole army and conquer this Ukraine, because here, it turns out, everyone was infringed. I am embarrassed to ask, in what language? You and I have been speaking in Russian on the air of a Ukrainian channel for a month or a year now, and no one is infringing on anything. I come to visit Ukrainian channels, speak in Russian, and no one chases me away, no one infringes on me, nothing happens to me.
Я прихожу в гости на украинский канал и говорю на русском языке, и меня никто не гонит, не ущемляет, ничего со мной не происходит.
So, what can I say? They're lying through their teeth. No one is infringing on the Russian language. It is another matter that Ukrainian should be the state language of the country. This is obvious, just as the official language in other countries is the languages of the primary people. And there's no problem here at all. There is no linguistic or linguistic infringement in any part of the existence of Ukrainian citizens.
Украины ни в одной части бытия нет никакого языкового лингвистического ущемления.
It's just a historical fact, and everything they say is pure lies.
Чистой воды.
These are some inventions, some fairy tales, horror stories, which they started spreading even before 2014, and since 2014 it has become widespread.
2014 года, а с 2014 это все приобрело уже повальный характер.
Anyone who has been to Ukraine, even in the western Ukraine, in Lviv, understands perfectly well that you speak Russian and you are answered in Russian. No problem at all. Now that there's a war going on, it might be a bit of a problem for some people in a domestic sense. But I'm sorry, they shouldn't have started the war.